Is there darkness on the planet?
There's what exists is the belief that there's no light, that there's not light. What exists is the belief. So I'll quote exactly what somebody said to me yesterday. Well, how about murderers and rapists and
Are they
and George Bush? What do you mean that there's no evil on the planet? Right?
Yeah.
And the fact is that if we, here I go, if we really believe in oneness, if that is what we are moving from, the belief that we are all interconnected, we are all one, we're all different tiny particles of one big organism that is our planet, that is Gaia. And apart from that, Gaia is part of, the earth is part of something, another organism, and it's all life. And if we move from that understanding that all is interconnected, then when we say that there's evil in the world, separate from goodness, it doesn't make any sense. And when people say, a lot of people paradoxically say that God is in all things, and yet that there's evil, you know. I've worked with rapists in prison, and I've worked with murderers, and what I see is the wounding, and what I see is the absolute conviction that they are evil. And so the belief in evil is what creates the problem. Something that came up this morning was that here in Quebec, I've encountered many children of mothers who wanted to be nuns. Okay? So there was, I guess, a generation of women who wanted to be nuns. Now, why would they want to be nuns? I have really been confronted in since I've been here in Quebec, but in many other areas of Catholic influence, also in Central and South America as well. I've been confronted with the incredible frequency of incest and abuse. Incredible frequency. There's few people that I know who have not been touched by some form of sexual abuse. And so it makes perfect sense for me that there would be a generation of women who wanted to be nuns. Right? And the people that I see who are children of these mothers have grown up having learned that sexuality is evil. Because what the women who wanted to be nuns, and if you just put yourself in that frame of mind, you know, they wanted to be brides of Christ. They wanted to devote their lives to God. They wanted to have nothing to do with sex. But I'm not so sure how much they were really conscious of not wanting to have anything to do with sex, right? What became foremost as an intent was the desire to serve God and to do nothing but that. And then they feel that, you know, la chair est faible, you know, that how do you say that in English? Flesh is weak. Flesh is weak, exactly. And so they ended up getting married and having children, and therefore that they're sinning, you know, that they are weak, that they were not able to follow their path towards God, and that instead they were entrapped in the flesh, and, you know, all of those things. And so many of the children of these women are anorexic. It's a learning that the body is evil, sinful, all of those things. And again, we're talking about the duality of spirit and matter, right? Being a sinner, right, was and still is a very big deal for a lot of people. And the whole concept of original sin, right? If you're born from the body of a woman, you're a sinner, right? You were born in sin. And it's so indoctrinated. It's so much a part of our culture.
If you were born and your parents weren't married.
It's even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you were born and your parents weren't married, yes. But even if everything was above board, you were born through sexual union, and therefore you were born in sin. Right? So, this whole question of our identities is coming again into play here, right? Remember, the water element is related to our identities as men and women and members of our clans. And the reason that the identity as men and women is important is because within the clan and the society, men and women have very particular roles, right? Hi, Maggie.
Quite an entrance.
So, who we are as men and women and how we undertake our roles as men and women is very much part of this phase of the cycle. This second phase of the cycle. And therefore, as we learned, it's related to fear, right? So our sexual identities are very much related to fear. Does that make sense, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how am I going to be a man? You know, what does that mean? How do I take that role? that's something that few people can clearly answer right now. You know, it's something that's been very muddied. How do I be a woman? The whole feminist movement, which interestingly enough, it turns out was funded by the CIA. Isn't that strange?
Yeah.
It's funded by the CIA. The rationale that I have read was that by supporting and instilling this idea of women's rights, etc., and by fostering the hatred of men, that families would split up, and that there would be dissension between parents, and that the children would then take as their models any institutional figure that they were exposed to, i.e., you know, government, schools, etc. Somebody had a lot of time to sit and think of very twisted things.
Mm-hmm.
But the CIA funded Ms. Magazine. And Gloria Steinem was a CIA agent.
Wow.
Wow, for real. Isn't that amazing? Some people were really planning ahead of time. Imagine. Anyway, so what we've seen is women, as we've discussed, you know, women seeing their mothers with no power and overloaded with work, and deciding that, and learning from that we had to get jobs and be independent and strong and efficient and not have emotions and all of those things. You know, we had to become career women, and what we did was we pulled all of our energy into the masculine aspects of ourselves. And what we see now is that men have become the scapegoat for everything. And everywhere in the media now, men are treated terribly.
Mm-hmm.
Terribly. The kinds of jokes, the kinds of derogatory remarks that are just accepted in the media and
The standard is not
everywhere.
very high, huh? Like the bar in the media is not very set very high. Like the kind of stereotype or the expectations of how men will act are really, really low. Which I find.
The expectations are that all of those hateful things that have become stereotypes, exactly. You know, that men are either brutes and domineering and violent and stupid and irresponsible and couch potatoes and all of those things, right? We've learned that women have to do everything, and the thing is that this is it's so common that this is what men are learning. This is what young men are learning, you know? And there's a whole, I'm going to back up again, in the generation of the 50s and the 60s, women learned to move into their masculine energy, and we learned to become men. And men learned not to be like their fathers, dominating and never there, absent. And so and I know I'm repeating myself, and so they learned to take care of women, right? To become very caring and nurturing, and to get their power through this caring and nurturing, and particularly of women. But because there's this getting the power through pleasing women, there's also a huge resentment and rage that has developed, right? And that's kind of where we're at now. You know, we've got a lot of very nurturing men around, and so often I see these couples where, first of all of a sudden the woman wakes up in her 40s and says, gee, I better have a kid. Right? And she's become very accomplished in her career and is very settled in that part of her identity. And then all of a sudden, well, wait a minute, maybe I'm missing something here. And because we attract our complementary opposites, a woman with a masculine energy is going to attract a man or a woman, but if she's trying to have babies, it's going to be a man with a feminine energy. And I've seen so many couples where the woman who has been really accomplished in her career, all of a sudden feels completely demolished and insecure when she becomes a mother, right? And so many women have said to me that their husbands are better mothers than they are, right? Because this nurturing aspect of themselves has been developed, right? And that's horrific for the identity of the woman who becomes a mother, and kind of it's classic, you know, that it used to be that you would see men holding babies like this, right, not knowing what to do with them. And now you see women holding babies like that and not knowing what to do with them, right? It's really amazing. And huge anger on both sides, right? Women classically, and this is what we hear everywhere in the media now, saying to men, grow a pair, you know? Like, you know, I want you to be a real man. But that's interesting, because I want you to be a real man means I want you to be more male than I am. Right? And that pushes, it could push men into that whole domineering and aggressive role again, right? Because there was a learning for so long that the masculine energy is violent, aggressive, domineering, all of those things, uncaring, and absent, and that feminine energy was emotional and scattered and powerless and fragile, right? Because those stereotypes are still very much in our bodies, as much as women are pushing against the stereotype of the fragile, ineffective woman, because we're dealing with duality again, it's either or, the only other option is to become the aggressive, domineering male energy, right? When we can become free of duality and look at all of the different tints and hues of dominance and submission in this spectrum, we can see that we can try on and we can react in less cartoonish ways. We're all acting like cartoons now, right? What I wanted to go to was that what was something that I saw very often working with rape victims, which was the shame that women held at having identified being dominated as being a real woman. Okay? Very often, what I heard from women who had experienced violent domination was shame and confusion about having felt sexual pleasure, about having felt somewhere deep inside them that this is really, now I'm really being a woman. You understand? The programming of women equals being dominated or being victimized is so strong that that programming comes out, particularly in intimacy, right? And often you'll hear people say, well, in my career I'm dominant, but in intimacy I'm submissive, right? And that's true for men and women, that I've heard that from. That there's a need to be like a man, right? To be like a man out there in the world and the career and everything. And then the need perhaps to live the other side of that duality, Perhaps this is a way of balancing, right? To be submissive sexually, and to want your partner to dominate. But I've really heard that very often. And the truth is that it's not that there's anything evil or bad about either end of any duality. It's just that we need to free ourselves to have access to everything in between, right? Depending on what feels right for us in the moment. understand what I'm talking about? As long as we're stuck in roles, right? As long as we're trapped in this is what a woman is, this is what a man is, this is what I have to be. Either by definition or in revolt to that definition, right? In rebellion against that definition. As long as we're trapped in a rigid idea of what we have to be, well, obviously we're not free. And we're going to, at some point, be unhappy. Although cages are nice, safe places for a while, right? And a lot of people are really happy in cages up to a certain point. But it seems to me that now, because of all of the instability of life right now on this planet, that all of our cages are being very, very shaken up. They're not as comfy anymore. And if we don't want to move out of them, very often life will just break them apart, you know? Like what we thought was, even though we weren't happy in this marriage, all of a sudden it breaks apart, right? Something falls out of the sky. A person. Or with jobs, you know. We can be extremely willing to kill ourselves going to the same job because it's secure, but all of a sudden we lose it. Our bodies, you know, speaking of cages, right? Our bodies all of a sudden start to break down. And we have to redefine who we are and how we're going to be in our bodies. So, sexuality is, to me, obviously related to fear. Intimacy is, to me, obviously related to fear. And many people don't understand that as much as they crave intimacy, that they're also terrified of it. You know? What we, and I'm speaking about this because we have these two huge waves of women and men, and so few couples these days. Have you noticed how many single people there are? It's incredible. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, maybe this is a Montreal reality. But it's really incredible, the chasm between men and women, you know. And I hear so many people talking about wanting an intimate relationship and denying the fact that it's a terrifying thought. And that as much as the desire is there for connection and intimacy, the terror of it is just as strong, you know. And that's basically why it's not happening.
These
raising it also because in this special period, and there has been other period like this, it's more like an individual process or individuation also. So it's not, because fear has always been there, and sometimes there is more couples than there, there is like.
Fear has always been there, but it's I think the fear of not being accepted in society and in the clan and in the tribe was greater than the fear of intimacy. You know, it's still considered a devoir. You know, to be fruitful and multiply, right? To be in a relationship and have children. You know, it's considered as a social responsibility. And particularly if you belong to a group of people that that needs to be propagated, you know. It's considered a social responsibility, right? And at the same time, as you said, you know, this goes back to this reality and this reality, right? The process of individuation or self-realization has become so strong. The me reality, right, has become so strong that many people just simply are not willing to make the compromises that they feel, that they believe profoundly that they would need to make in order to be, you know, part of the tribe and part of the role of wife and mother or husband and father. In young people, it's really amazing to me to see the number of men who are absolutely not willing anymore to kill themselves to support a family. They just don't want to do it anymore. No? And avec raison. Right? But what's happening, the classic thing that's happening, is that, you know, the men refuse to do what was the classic male role, right? And because of that, women have to work. And when children become involved, the woman has the role of mother as well as working, right? It's really rare now that I encounter mothers who don't work.
And,
pardon me?
unless they can afford to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Work.
That's right. And it's rare.
And even then they have nannies
Mm-hmm.
who raise the kids for them.
Mm-hmm. So it's a mess. and it's good that it's a mess. because we're really questioning things that weren't questioned before. No?
I have sort of a question relating to last week when you were suggesting Well, actually, Kate asked the question about the power of intention, and we were talking about clearing the body and the power of intention. Because I was thinking about how you were talking about families, right, and young couples having families and so on, and it's, I don't know, like it seems that there are people who are out there who are succeeding in having families, and they have their jobs, and they seem like happy people, right? So, and my question, I was kind of wondering, like, if people aren't working consciously on their bodies, and they're not aware of their body in this way, then, but they still set intentions to accomplish things, you know, like, I guess, like, I don't know, actually, I don't know, I don't really know what my question is, but I've just been thinking about that, like.
Okay, so are you saying that you see a lot of people just going about their lives, having families and being happy? And
Well,
and what's happening with them?
well, yeah, sort of, but
A lot of people say that to me. They'll say, well, I'm the only one I know, right?
but that's what I'm not saying, though. I'm not trying to say that, but I'm wondering, is there, like, could it be the case? Could this also be the case that people are happy and they have families and they don't even think about these things
Yeah,
that
sure.
we talk about in here?
Of course.
So how does that manifest, or how is that? Is it just because of karma?
Well,
Or,
we come into different lineages, right? And different lineages have different levels of suffering, understanding of suffering. There's a lot of people who are really focused still on this horizontal axis, right? And really believe that the process of self-fulfillment is one of being a good member of society,
right.
obeying the rules of society, being, meeting somebody, getting married, having the requisite number of children,
The car.
good jobs, and in having jobs, they what's the word? Give to society, right? And a lot of people still really believe that, and it's not that that's false, right? That's just simply one track, right?
Yeah.
One track in the recording. Huh? And then there are people who are pushing the evolution of society into other places, pushing the evolution of humanity into other places. And this has traditionally been the role of the artists and the philosophers and religious thinkers, spiritual thinkers, right? this was when we were nicely compartmentalized, and the responsibility for our spiritual health and well-being we put into the hands of priests and rabbis and gurus and right?
Yeah.
But whereas there's still a lot of people that do that, there's a growing number of people who are taking responsibility for their own beings on all the different levels. And that creates that makes a lot of waves, you know? That creates chaos. Huh? And that kind of chaos, which is actually this vertical reality, right? Which is the connection between spirit and matter, right? And me as with my own mission, my own purpose, my own reason for being here, right? Many people now, so many people now, have as their main question, what is my purpose in life, right? And will not just take for granted that, well, okay, my purpose in life is to get married and have children and grow old and serve my society as a useful member of society, and that's it, that's all, you know? So people often ask me, well, why does my friend not worry about things like this? You know, I'm surrounded by people who seem absolutely happy. Why are they so happy? Great if they're happy, right? But also, you can never judge what's going on inside somebody. And yes, we're all particles of this planet Gaia. And the earth is being exposed to such high frequencies of energy now that I think that the ability of someone to remain on track is becoming more and more difficult and less frequent or common.
What are you saying? On track meaning socially?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, before, it was easy to tell the future. It was easy to predict somebody's future. Well, somebody would come and sit in front of you, and you could see where they were, you could see where they've been, and it's really easy to just plot a graph. You know, easy, c'est très facile de dire, bon, c'est là où ils étaient, ils ont été, c'est ici où ils sont, bon, c'est logique, c'est facile, c'est là où il va être dans 10 ans. Right? Mais maintenant, c'est plus pareil. C'est vraiment plus pareil. Maintenant, à chaque instant, chacun de nous a des milliers de choix. Hein? Et ça c'est vraiment le fait que nous vivons beaucoup plus ce que tu as appelé l'individuation, right? La réalisation de soi. Et alors, non seulement ce n'est plus facile, mais ce n'est plus éthique de dire à quelqu'un, bon, c'est ça qui va t'arriver, you'll meet a hot, tall, handsome stranger, you know, that kind of thing. On ne peut plus prédire le futur parce que ça coupe le potentiel de quelqu'un. Et maintenant, nous avons autant de différents potentiels, autant de choix que moi je considère que ce n'est plus quelque chose de éthique de faire des prédictions pour des gens. Did you get that? So, right? So that I really personally don't consider it ethical at all to predict the future for somebody anymore. Even if it is somebody who's living, you know, the nice suburban life. Right? Because there's just too many, our potentials have opened up too much. And at every instant we have this huge panoply of choice. So you can't say anymore, you're here now, you're going to be there in 10 years. Because whoops, or whoops, or whoops, you know? So fewer and fewer people are actually willing to read the future.
Can we turn the lights on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody
4
need to
o'clock.
pee? Does anybody need to pee?